Welcome to the Crawcast. I am your host, George Krawczak, and this is what happened in week one of the NFL season. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Just remember, week one really doesn't matter too much. Because guess what? Right now you have about 16 teams that are thinking they're going to win the Super Bowl, and you have 16 teams that think their season is over. And of course, the truth is in the middle. A lot of these teams are going to figure it out. Some are going to get better, some are going to get worse. And of course, there's going to be injuries that are going to play a huge factor in the season. The season is just beginning, but this is what happened in week one. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. And if you want my more immediate thoughts on things, follow me on X/Twitter at Crawcast. That's where I'll be live tweeting almost every single game of the year, and you'll get my more immediate thoughts and reactions on things. Now let's get started. The first game was the Dallas Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles won 24-20. So the Eagles won 24-20. The Eagles' leading passer was Jalen Hurts, who threw for 152 yards. Their leading rusher was Jalen Hurts, who had 62 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And their leading receiver was Jahan Dotson, who had 59 receiving yards. And for the Cowboys, their leading passer was Dak Prescott, who had 188 passing yards. Their leading rusher was Javonte Williams, who had 54 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And their leading receiver was CeeDee Lamb. So overall, this was a very good game. It was really close. Both offenses looked elite and kind of how you expected. But the biggest thing that happened before the game. Jalen Carter did his best Hawk Tua impression, and he spat on Dak Prescott. So what happened was Dak spat on the ground kind of in front of the Eagles. Dak says that he just needed to spit, and he was spitting on the ground. Whereas Jalen Carter says he saw that as Dak spitting at the Eagles, and so he went over and spat at Dak. So Jalen Carter got ejected for the game from that. And honestly, it kind of doesn't matter what if Dak is telling the truth or not, whether he just spat on the ground and it happened to be in the Eagles' direction, or if he actually spat at the Eagles. The point is there's a huge difference between spitting on the ground and actually spitting on someone. And that's just the type of unsportsmanlike behavior that you can't have in the game. And personally, I would suspend Jalen Carter for a game. I think he deserves to be suspended. Overall, both offenses looked very, very good in the first half, and then in the second half, the defenses kind of showed up and started clamping down. CeeDee Lamb, he looked great. He had a couple of key drops, but overall, that's not something to be worried about, even though the hands are an issue, but he's so good where it's like even if he drops a pass every once in a while, it doesn't really matter. And the Cowboys, Micah Parsons, this I feel like was a huge mistake letting him go, regardless of what he did in the Green Bay game, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But the Cowboys' offense looks elite, and the Cowboys' defense struggled a lot. And it felt like they were really missing an elite edge rusher like Micah Parsons on the defense. And so I think it's tough because the Cowboys are in a situation where they're too good to kind of give away the season and give up before the season starts, kind of like a team like the Saints. But they're not bad. Or sorry, but they're not bad enough to kind of they're too good. Well, sorry, let me rephrase that. They're too good to give up on the season, but they're not good enough to potentially win the Super Bowl. And so what needs to happen is they need a star edge rusher like Micah Parsons, and the defense is really missing him. And it sucks because this offense is really good. This offense is elite, and this offense can win them a lot of games, but the defense is so shaky, it's going to be a struggle. And then overall, the Eagles, they look good. They're picking up right where they left off. The defense did struggle quite a bit at times, and that could be concerning for the future, but also they're missing probably their best defensive player in Jalen Carter. So overall, I think you have a positive outlook for both teams. It's just that the Cowboys are really missing a key guy like Micah Parsons on the defense. The next game is the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers won 27-21. So the Chargers won 27-21. The Chargers' leading passer was Justin Herbert, who threw for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Omaron Hampton, who had 48 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Quentin Johnson, who had 79 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And for the Chiefs, their leading passer was Patrick Mahomes, who had 258 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher, who was Patrick Mahomes, who had 57 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Hollywood Brown, who had 99 yards and just 99 yards. So in this game, you have to give all the credit for the Chargers. They looked absolutely phenomenal. Justin Herbert looked elite, and honestly, the player of the game that I don't think people are giving enough credit to is Quentin Johnston. Like, he has the height, he has the speed, he is built like an elite wide receiver, but he just doesn't have the hands. He drops every single ball that came his way. This game, he was great. He was catching everything, and so if Quentin Johnston finally figured it out, it feels like the Chargers have three potential wide receiver ones in Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, and Quentin Johnston. And so overall, the Chargers looked phenomenal. Justin Herbert looked great, and a just all around great game for the Chargers on offense. Like, this looks like it could be Herbert's year to win like MVP or something like that, especially if he keeps playing like this and the amazing receiving core. Hampton did have was just okay on the ground. He did have a big problem where he was supposed to fall down inbounds, but he accidentally went out of bounds at the end of the first half, and that gave the Chiefs a field goal, so that was a big problem. But other than that, the Chargers looked absolutely great. And then the Chiefs. This is where their defense kind of came falling apart a little bit. Because here's this big secret. I know Patrick Mahomes is the big name and the big like savior of the Chiefs, but the last 2 years they have not been leaning on Patrick Mahomes. They've been leaning on an amazing defense to win them games. And so now their defense struggled, plain and simple, and their offense wasn't good enough to pull out that amazing pull out the defense out of the hole. And again, the defense is what usually kept them in games and was made them really, really great. And so the big news here is Xavier Worthy did injure his shoulder. Travis Kelce heard that Taylor Swift loved him too much and ran directly into Xavier Worthy, and he, I believe, dislocated his shoulder, and he's going to miss several weeks. So now your number one receiver in Rashid Rice is suspended for 6 weeks. Marquise Brown, he's going to be gone for a few weeks with a dislocated shoulder. You are definitely missing receiving targets, and that is a huge problem for the Chiefs. And personally, what I do is I try to get Tyreek Hill back. He knows the offense. He was in Andy Reid's system almost his entire career. Patrick Mahomes and him have a huge connection of each other, and he hates Miami. I know we'll get to the Miami game a little bit later, but he previously wanted out of Miami last year because he hated them so much, and then there was nothing but frustration with him in Miami this year. It kind of makes too much sense. And since Miami, I'm not necessarily saying their season is over, but it's starting to not look very good and not trend in the right direction, maybe they just take some of Tyreek Hill's contract this year and then kind of worry about it next year. Maybe you can cut Tyreek Hill at the end of the year if you're the Chiefs, or ask him to take a pay cut or something like that. But overall, the Chiefs are in deep trouble without a wide receiver. And this is an interesting one because it felt like throughout the game where it's like the Chargers were the better team than the Chiefs. And that's what happened last year. In almost all their games, the Chiefs looked like the worst team, but the Chiefs just always somehow found a way to win. And I think everyone, myself included, is like, oh, it's going to happen again. They're going to win. But no, the Chargers were able to hold on and stop the Chiefs. The next game is the Miami Dolphins versus the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts won 33-8. So in this game, the Colts beat the Dolphins 33-8. The Colts' leading passer was Daniel Jones, who threw for 272 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Jonathan Taylor, who had 71 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Michael Pittman Jr., who had 80 receiving yards and a touchdown. And for the Dolphins, their leading passer was Tua, who had 114 yards, one touchdown, two interceptions. Their leading rusher was Devon Achane, who had 55 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Tyreek Hill, who had 40 receiving yards. So in this game, the Dolphins struggled a lot. I'll first start with the Colts. Daniel Jones looked really, really good. And I don't think you'll expect this high level of play for him every week, but this is what the Colts needed. Because this is what I talked about last year, all of last year. They were a good team. They had a good defense. They had good weapons. It's just that they had just such an insanely incompetent quarterback in Anthony Richardson, and that cost them a lot of games because even with Anthony Richardson not playing well, they were still in a lot of games. So all they need is just a quarterback who won't make those same mistakes and will just play decent enough. And I think Daniel Jones can do that. That does get to an interesting question. What do you do after the season? Do you try to get Daniel Jones back? Do you let him go? I guess that's a question I'll answer later in the season because we'll see how this ends up. But, overall, Daniel Jones looked great, and this is kind of exactly how it was expected to be, with the Colts looking really good. And I do have to say, I see people calling Daniel Jones Indiana Jones. I do not think that will work. You shouldn't call him Indiana Jones because a much more famous person is called Indiana Jones. with the Indiana Jones movie series. That name is stolen. You can't call Daniel Jones that. Call him Danny Dimes, or maybe if you want to come up with something else, do that. But Indiana Jones is already taken. You can't steal someone's name. Okay, and then now in the Miami Dolphins, this was just a complete disaster. The Tua looked rushed. He did not play. He just didn't play well, plain and simple. The whole offense struggled. The whole defense struggled. It was all around disaster. And this is my problem with Mike McDaniel, is because he feels like he never adjusts his offense. And that was my big problem with him last year. When Tua got injured, instead of trying to build a better offense around Tyler Huntley or Tim Boyle or Skylar Thompson, he just said, no, you're going to play exactly like Tua and just be popped into the offense. And it just didn't work. Like the big example I have is the Packers. When Jordan Love got injured, Matt LaFleur rebuilt the offense from the ground up for Malik Willis because Malik Willis is not Jordan Love. He has a different skill set. And so, so with Mike McDaniel, he refused to rebuild the offense. And then now when things weren't working in this game, he refused to change anything. And I just think he's just one of those guys where excellent offensive coordinator. I truly think he can be a good offensive coordinator. But he's just not like a head coach material. And that's just not a good role for him. Everyone's frustrated in Miami. Everyone wants out. I do think Tua's getting a little bit too much hate in the sense where, yes, he was horrible this week. He was definitely one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL this week, no doubt about it. But overall, throughout his career, I think Tua has run Mike McDaniel's offense well and has played well, and they've had success when Tua's on the field. The big issue is that Tua can't stay healthy, and he's constantly not on the field. But overall, it's just going to be interesting where this goes. If maybe Tua will get in a funk and lose his confidence, or maybe Mike McDaniel's going to start stressing because he might get fired. But overall, I think maybe there's a little too much panic in the Dolphins, but it's either way. It's just week one, but the Colts, you gotta be very happy with that. The next game is the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets. The Steelers won 34-32. So the Steelers won 34-32. Their leading passer was Aaron Rodgers, who threw for 244 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Jaylen Warren, who had 37 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was DK Metcalf, who had 83 receiving yards. And for the Jets, their leading passer was Justin Fields, who had 218 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Breece Hall, who had 107 yards. And their leading receiver was Garrett Wilson, who had 95 yards and a touchdown. So I see the narrative of this game is Aaron Rodgers is back. But here's the thing. He never left. He was not that bad with the Jets, and that was always my point. Even if you watch my prediction video, I said it. He was not that bad in the Jets. He was average. Average to above average. I'd say he was more in the average range. But the whole Jets organization around him is what failed. And again, he deserves some of the blame because, again, he was average and they expected him to play spectacular. But the defense was bad. The special teams was bad. And Aaron Rodgers could only do so much. And now, here at the Steelers, yes, defense is a problem. That is something that concerns me. But this is a unique situation where the Jets, everyone knew, okay, they're going to be a heavy rushing team. And so they kind of ran right at them. And the Steelers struggled with the run defense. Whereas most teams in the NFL are going to be more of a pass-heavy situation. So this is a little bit of a unique situation. But overall, Aaron Rodgers played great. The offense played great. Everyone was just really, really good. The run game was a little bit worrying, and the offensive line did struggle a lot at times, so that does concern me when they're against some of these elite pass rushers like Myles Garrett or somebody like that. So that is a little concerning is how the offensive line will hold up. But overall, the offense did a pretty good job. The defense, they need to play better, and they need to step up. Like I said, I think it's a little bit of a unique situation because of the Jets' heavy rushing attack, but they just need to step up, plain and simple. And then the Jets. Justin Fields, he played really good. He deserves all the credit in the world because this might be his best game, period. I don't know. Maybe he had a couple of games with the Bears that were better, but he played really well this game. I do think they need to trust him a little bit more on his deep passing because he basically had that one perfect ball to Garrett Wilson, who beat Darius Slay in coverage. But then other than that, they did really not trust Justin Fields in the passing attack. It was kind of more of a lot of short dump offs, a lot of scheme things up, and they didn't really trust him to let loose. And maybe that's a good thing because when Justin Fields was forced to pass, he did struggle. But overall, the Jets, even though you did lose, I think that you couldn't have asked for a much better situation where you have Justin Fields has hope. And that's, I think, is a big thing is just hope, because especially at the quarterback position, a lot of this is confidence. Because almost every quarterback can make the right throw, but you kind of have to have belief in yourself saying, okay, I can make the right throw. I can throw this deep ball. Because sometimes these quarterbacks get too in their head and it's like, oh, I can't throw an interception. So they like hold the ball too long and take a sack. Or maybe they throw like a 2 yard check down because they're too scared to go deep, or throw it intermediate because they're too scared of an interception. But overall, both teams played really well, and the Pittsburgh defense really needs to do better. Also, DK Metcalf, he needs to play a little bit better because he is a great wide receiver and he can be really great for the Steelers. But he dropped a few easy, wide open passes. He had one that was bobbled and they eventually caught. He just needs to play better. So, for the Steelers, offensive line and drops are a little bit of a worry. At least Aaron Rodgers is playing great. That's good news to know, and looks like he works well in Arthur Smith's offense. But overall, I trust the defense will play better. It's just a question of drops in the offensive line. The next game is the Carolina Panthers versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars won 26 to 10. So the Jacksonville Jaguars won 26 to 10. The Jaguars' leading passer was Trevor Lawrence, who had 178 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Their leading rusher was Travis Etienne, who had 143 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Brenton Strange, who had 59 receiving yards. For the Panthers, their leading passer was Bryce Young, who had 154 yards, one touchdown, two interceptions. Their leading rusher was Chuba Hubbard, who had 57 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Ted McMillan, who had 68 receiving yards. So in this game, the Jaguars dominated all day long, but Trevor Lawrence didn't look very good, and Bryce Young looked terrible. And both of these guys are former number one overall picks who have definitely just not lived up to the hype really whatsoever in the NFL. And so Travis Etienne played amazing. And that's really shocking because last year Tank Bigsby was obviously their number one back over Etienne. And now Bigsby's been traded to Philadelphia. But overall, just really shocking that Etienne played so well. And then Bryce Young. Last year, towards the end of the year, this is why I said if you rewatch my videos of last year, he was playing really good for Bryce Young. Meaning, probably for an NFL quarterback, you'd say, okay, that's average, maybe slightly above average, but now he's reverted back to old Bryce Young. And it's just tough grading both these teams because I don't really see either of them being that good. Like, the Jaguars, I think they'll finish more in the middle of the pack, but I don't really see them as a playoff team. And then the Panthers are definitely not a playoff team. And it kind of feels like Bryce Young's just trying to fight to save his job and save his career and to continue being a starter in the NFL. Like, overall, it feels like there's just not much to say here because neither of these teams feel that interesting to me. And I don't feel like either of them outshine the other in the sense where Jacksonville did win and they did dominate most of the game. But also, I think they're objectively a better team because the Panthers are terrible. And so it's kind of expected and kind of should have happened. The next game is the Arizona Cardinals versus the New Orleans Saints. The Cardinals won 20 to 13. So the Cardinals won 20 to 13. The Cardinals' leading passer was Kyler Murray, who had 163 passing yards and two touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Trey Benson, who had 69 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Marvin Harrison Jr., who had 71 receiving yards and a touchdown. And for the Saints, their leading passer was Spencer Rattler, who had 214 yards. Their leading rusher was Alvin Kamara, who had 45 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Juwan Johnson, who had 76 receiving yards. So this was a very interesting game. Neither of the team looked great, but I was kind of surprised how bad the Cardinals looked and how good the Saints looked. And I understand that. Like, hey, one team lost and one team won. But the Saints, I think, are the worst team in the NFL, and I still stick by that. I do think they're probably worse than the Panthers. But Spencer Rattler looked fairly decent, and the Cardinals' defense, which was really strong last year and really good, they kind of didn't look that great. And then the Cardinals' offense, again, was also kind of average. I was really impressed with the Saints, kind of keeping this a close game, and really shocked that the Cardinals didn't pull away. Again, this could just be like the Week 1 Saints. Remember last year where I think the first 2 games of the season, they scored 40 points in each. And maybe like kind of like the reverse Bengals, where like the Bengals always play terrible in Week 1. Maybe the Saints just always play well in Week 1. But overall, like the Cardinals got the win, and that's important. But they just need to keep building. Their offense needs to play better, and then their defense, which was really strong last year, still needs to play better. And then the Saints, this is improvement. They didn't get blown out. I thought this was the biggest shot at a blowout all of Week 1. All the games felt really close, but I'm like, nope, this one's a blowout, and it wasn't. Again, Spencer Rattler looks fairly decent, and there were kind of a couple of different passes, like a couple of drop passes away from potentially winning this one. So we'll see how the Saints do in the future, but I'm really shocked that this was this close, and that kind of concerns me for the Cardinals, and, maybe the Saints will do better than expected. And again, maybe not. It's Week 1, but overall, the Cardinals I expected more, and the Saints I expected a little bit less. The next game is the New York Giants versus the Washington Commanders. The Commanders won 21-6. So the Commanders won 21-6. The Commanders' leading passer is Jaden Daniels, who had 233 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Bill Jakrowski-Merritt, who had 82 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is Deebo Samuel, who had 77 receiving yards. For the Giants, their leading passer was Russell Wilson, who had 168 yards. Their leading rusher was Russell Wilson, who had 44 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Malik Nabers, who had 71 receiving yards. So this game did not really go as I expected. So I thought it was going to be really close, and it was close for almost the entirety of this game. The Commanders really didn't break out at all, and it was just really, really close. And I thought I expected more out of the Giants' offense. So I will admit I was wrong about the Commanders. I said this a lot last year, and I guess I'll continue saying it this year, but I guess I'll continue being wrong, where typically a team that has a bunch of old guys that are out of their prime doesn't play well, like with Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz, Von Miller, and Bobby Wagner. And you say, wow, this is an amazing team for like 8 years ago. And so typically those teams of old guys don't do well. But hey, I continue to get proven wrong. Although the offense did tend to struggle a little bit against this Giants defense. And the Giants defense is a really good defense. The one thing that shocked me though is how terrible Russell Wilson is because I thought, okay, the Giants were in a lot of games last year and they didn't have a quarterback. Daniel Jones played horrible. Who else did they have? Tommy DeVito, he played horrible. Tim Boyle, he played horrible. They basically didn't have a quarterback, and they're in a lot of games. So I'm like, okay, now Russell Wilson's in. He's not elite, but at least he can be kind of like what I talked about with Daniel Jones with the Colts. As long as he can be average, that's all the Giants needed, and he couldn't even do that. He played absolutely terrible, and I was just shocked by that because the Giants were in this game the entire time and could have won it kind of easily if Russell Wilson just played a little bit better. And so like I said, that does concern me a little bit about the Commanders, is that this was a close game, but also the Giants do have a decent defense. Overall, I'd see the Giants talking about potentially starting Jackson Dart, and I personally wouldn't do it. I wouldn't give in so quickly, because the whole idea is we don't want Jackson Dart to get in there, lose his confidence, start playing horrible, and then, start playing horrible, lose his confidence, and then he's a bust. We want him to sit, learn, and then be good for next year. And I say stick to the plan. I get it. Jackson Dart did amazing in preseason, and I get it. Russell Wilson is struggling, but I just stick with the plan. I don't see any reason to change course right now. And then Commanders, good win, played decently well. It was a close game throughout. Offense needs to play a little bit better, but also, again, like I said, I think the Giants' defense played well, but the Commanders' defense played absolutely fantastic, and I think they're going to be a good team this year. The next game is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Buccaneers won 23-20. So the Buccaneers won 23-20. The Buccaneers' leading passer was Baker Mayfield, who had 167 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Baker Mayfield, who had 39 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Emeka Egbuka, who had 67 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And for the Falcons, their leading passer was Michael Penix Jr., who had 298 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Bijan Robinson, who had 24 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Bijan Robinson, who had 100 receiving yards and a touchdown. So overall, this was kind of a decent game for both of them. And who knows what would have happened if Younghoe Koo made the game tying kick, because it was really back and forth. Neither team had a rushing game really at all, and so it's kind of constant passing. Both defenses played good at times and then broke at times. And then Michael Penix Jr. had a really, really good touchdown run where he kind of just stretched over the goal line. And it does show Penix size does matter. And so overall, I think this game had a lot of optimism for both teams. Both defenses played well. Uh, Again, both rushing games struggled, and that's a concern for the future with the O-lines. I just don't think either O-line played well, but both defenses played well. Both passing attacks played well, and it's kind of exciting for the future. See what Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, they did pretty well last year, so I assume that they're probably, yeah, I'd say they probably are favorites to win the division. But the Falcons, they're right up there too, because I don't see the Saints winning and I don't see the Panthers winning. So, these are the two potential division winners, and it's exciting to see Penix finally look decent, because last year in his couple of games he started, he looked horrible, and then the Buccaneers kind of are picking up right where they left off, minus the rushing attack. The next game is the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns. The Bengals won 17 to 16. So the Bengals won 17 to 16. The Bengals' leading passer was Joe Burrow, who had 113 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Chase Brown, who had 43 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was T. Higgins, who had 33 receiving yards. And then for the Browns, their leading passer was Joe Flacco, who had 290 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Dylan Sampson, who had 29 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Jerry Jeudy, who had 66 receiving yards. So the Browns should have won this game, plain and simple. They were the better team. They played better the entire game, and the Browns should have won. Jerry Jeudy had a couple of really bad drops, and then the Browns offense definitely stalled it sometimes, but they played better, plain and simple. And then the Bengals, they played horrible. I don't know what it is. It's just like until probably about like week 4, the Bengals just suck. Like at least they got a win. Um, when they played horrible, like because if you look at last year, they barely lost to the Patriots and they sucked, and they ended up being I believe 1 win away from making the playoffs. And so overall, at least the Bengals got a win. You gotta be excited about that. But I can't explain it. They had the starters playing preseason. Burrow got killed with a couple of sacks in preseason, but overall they look good in preseason, and I just can't explain it. It just takes Burrow and Chase and the Bengals to like 4 games to get going. I like it literally makes no sense. Like they for whatever reason they just can't play at the beginning of the season. I don't like legitimately I have zero logical explanation for it, because Burrow is good, Chase is good, this is a good team, and they just can't do it. And then the defense played fairly well, and like I said, I just have no reaction to this game because both teams didn't play well, and the Bengals should have lost. Like they're a couple of missed kicks away from losing, and like I said, it just makes no logical sense to me that the Bengals look this bad, and it always happens. And it just again, I can't explain it. It makes no sense to me, and I just don't get it. I feel like a broken record at this point, because they shouldn't be this bad, but they are. So we'll see if they make the playoffs. Again, they should, but I just don't know. I can't explain it. And then the Browns, the defense played well, so that's a positive, but I don't know how much longer Joe Flacco is going to start. And so we'll see how Dylan Gabriel does, if he does, but Joe Flacco just needs to play a little bit better, and the offense as a whole need to play better, because I think the Browns can be a decent team. They have a good defense. Their offense just needs to stop being kind of incompetent, because that's what happened last year. Is they didn't have a quarterback, kind of like what I talked about for Indianapolis Colts. They have a good defense. They just didn't have a quarterback, and so if Joe Flacco plays a little bit better and the offensive line plays a little bit better, they can be a good team. Uh, like I said, the Bengals make no sense, and the Browns really should have won this one. It's unexplainable to me. The next game is the Las Vegas Raiders versus the New England Patriots. The Raiders won 20-13. So the Raiders won 20-13. The Raiders' leading passer is Geno Smith, who had 362 passing yards, one touchdown, one interception. Their leading rusher is Ashton Jeanty, who had 38 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is Brock Bowers, who had 103 yards. And then for the Patriots, their leading passer is Drake May, who had 287 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Their leading rusher was Travion Henderson, who had 27 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Kayshon Boutte, who had 103 receiving yards. So overall, I think both offenses were about equal. The both passing attacks worked really well. Drake May looked fairly decent. Geno Smith looked very decent, apart from a bad interception. The big story of this game is Brock Bowers did get injured for the Raiders, which was very unfortunate because the Raiders need him. He is one of the best tight ends in the NFL, and he's really good. And then also, both O-lines were terrible. Neither team had a run game. Jeanty looked bad, but also, I'm not sure how much of that is Jeanty being a bad player, because I don't believe he is a bad player. But I think it's the O-line. I think it's stuck behind a terrible offensive line. And same with the Patriots. I don't think the Patriots' offensive line is that good. And so that really let the team down. But overall, I'm not sure either of these teams are playoff teams because I just don't think they're overall as a team are there. But I think they're pretty evenly matched, and I think they should be kind of more in the middle of the pack. And I feel like I just don't have much to say about this because, neither team's impressed or neither team's disappointed. They're just kind of there. The next game is the San Francisco 49ers versus the Seattle Seahawks. The 49ers won 17-13. So the 49ers won 17-13. The 49ers' leading passer was Brock Purdy, who threw for 277 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Christian McCaffrey, who rushed for 69 yards. And their leading receiver was Ricky Pearsall, who had 108 receiving yards. For the Seahawks, their leading passer is Sam Darnold, who had 150 yards. Their leading rusher is Zach Charbonnet, who had 47 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had 124 receiving yards. So in this game, neither team really played that great. So Brock Purdy, he did not play particularly well. And then the big story is kind of the injuries, where 49ers, George Kittle is going to be out for the next few games. Brock Purdy is injured, may miss the next game or two. We don't know yet. Christian McCaffrey suffered an injury, but it seems like he's going to be fine. And just overall, they are a beat up team. And then Sam Darnold just didn't really play that great. Both these teams were in contention, definitely, but it seems like Jackson Smith-Njigba was the only receiver on the Seahawks. And then Ricky Pearsall and Christian McCaffrey both had really great games. And it's one of those things where neither team played well. So the Seahawks do have a lot more building blocks, and then the 49ers suffered a bunch of injuries, and that's kind of been their downfalls. Like, they've been the most injured team in the NFL for the past few years, and injuries have been killing them. Injuries are continuing to kill them, and they just got to figure it out how to stay healthy. I don't know how to do that, but overall, both these teams are fairly decent, and it's going to be exciting to who's going to win the division because I feel like the division is wide open. The Cardinals I don't think are going to be that great, but other than that, they're wide open, and both these teams are in contention. But Sam Darnold just needs to play better. The Seahawks gave him a decent-sized contract because he was really good last year outside the playoff game. And just overall, they just need to play better, plain and simple. And so let's see if Sam Darnold can earn his contract. The next game is the Tennessee Titans versus the Denver Broncos, and the Broncos won 20-12. So the Broncos won 20-12. The Broncos' leading passer was Bo Nix, who had 176 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was R.J. Harvey, who had 70 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Courtland Sutton, who had 61 receiving yards and a touchdown. And for the Titans, their leading passer was Cam Ward, who had 112 passing yards. Their leading rusher was Tony Pollard, who had 60 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Tony Pollard, who had 29 receiving yards. So in this game, both offenses sucked. They both played horrible. And I give Cam Ward an excuse because the Titans are just so undisciplined. They had so many penalties, so much bad play. And Cam Ward's a rookie because I know a lot of people are kind of misconstrued on how rookies normally play because you're like, oh look, Jaden Daniels had a good rookie year, Bo Nix had a good rookie year. If you go past that, C.J. Stroud had a good rookie year. And then Justin Herbert had a good rookie year. So more recently, we've seen rookies play well, but normally they don't. And it's kind of Cam Ward where he had a lot of drop balls, but he didn't play well really at all. The defense was kind of killing him all game. But the bigger news to me is Bo Nix not playing well, because I think a lot of us expected him to take a big leap because he looked really good last year and then lost in the playoffs. And now it's like, okay, Bo Nix, you're going to take a second year jump. But he played terrible. And I guess, yeah, he played terrible. I'll say it. And so it's going to be interesting if Bo Nix is going to cost the Broncos their season. Their defense is still great, and so that's going to keep them in a lot of games, but no excuses. Bo Nix needs to play better, plain and simple. And then Cam Ward, he's a rookie. I don't think a lot of people expected much from him, so we'll see how he ends the season. But I don't expect the Titans to be very good, and I don't expect Cam Ward to be very good. But and again, he's a rookie. A lot of rookies don't play well their rookie season, so you need to cut Cam Ward a little slack. Whereas Bo Nix, he just needs to play better, plain and simple. The next game is the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers won 27-13. So the Green Bay Packers won 27-13. The Packers' leading passer is Jordan Love, who had 188 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Josh Jacobs, who had 66 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Romeo Doubs, who had 68 receiving yards. And for the Lions, their leading passer was Jared Goff, who had 225 yards, a touchdown, and interception. Their leading rusher was Dave Montgomery, who had 25 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Sam Laporta, who had 79 receiving yards. So the Green Bay Packers absolutely destroyed the Detroit Lions in this game. And it's quite shocking because I thought this was going to be really, really close. And I actually picked the Lions to win. But granted, I made that prediction before Micah Parsons, but I didn't think he'd play a huge role anyways. And so overall, just the team played fantastic. The offense was rolling, the defense was rolling, and Micah Parsons was absolutely fantastic. He was wreaking havoc in the backfield almost every single play, and he was just destroying the Lions, kind of plain and simple. And overall, the Lions look terrible. And I don't think this means the Lions season is done, because this is kind of my big takeaways for the Packers. A lot of positives. Drops. No drops by the wide receivers. Really, really good, because that's something they dealt with a lot last year, is dropped passes, and hopefully that issue is solved this year. And then Jordan Love needs to play smarter. He had 2 dropped interceptions and an interception return from a touchdown that was taken back because there was 2 penalties on the play. One was holding and one was an unnecessary roughness. So what happened is that there was holding on the play. Plain and simple, holding. That was a good call. There was holding. And then the unnecessary roughness, which was declined, so the penalty didn't even count. After the interception, Aiden Hutchinson just kind of laid out Jordan Love while Jordan Love was standing there after the interception. And technically, I think it does fall into the definition, but I just think it's a bit of a weak call because at that point, Jordan Love can chase down the runner, who is Brian Branch, and to make a tackle. So I think he should probably be able to be blocked, but it didn't matter anyway because that penalty was declined and the holding was pretty obvious, and so that interception shouldn't count. And then the defense for the Packers. The corners did struggle a little bit when Jared Goff had time to throw, but Jared Goff had no time to throw. So it was just check down after check down after check down. Jahmyr Gibbs set a record after he only had 31 yards with 10 receptions. 3.1 yards per reception with 10 receptions. That's insane. They had no running game whatsoever. And Micah Parsons was really that guy. Even in his limited snaps, it felt like almost every single time he was getting pressure. Almost every single time he was causing havoc for Jared Goff, the running backs, and Penei Sewell, who's one of the best tackles, was struggling with him. Micah Parsons is an elite defender. And then for the Lions, yes, this is cause for concern, but not necessarily panic. Because, yes, they looked horrible. The offense couldn't do anything. The defense was struggling. And then at one point, I know the Matt LaFleur got criticized with playing calling because what happened is the Packers got up to a big lead, and then they kind of stopped trying to score. And it's tough because once you get a big lead early on, it's what do? Do you just try to waste the clock and kind of just run the ball? Or do you try to score and like all gas, no brakes, but you risk like an interception or allowing the other team to come back? It's just tough. It's not really a right or wrong answer. But with the Lions, they struggled a lot. The interior of their offensive line struggled. Their whole offense struggled as a whole. Tesla had an amazing one-handed reception in the final minute of the game, so that was good. But Aiden Hutchinson struggled. The defense struggled. It was a bad showing for the Lions. But I don't think it's necessarily a bet like necessarily that the Lions are going to be bad. I think the Lions and Packers just swapped places. Because if you look at last year, excluding the Bears game, but I'm not sure how much you want to count that because uh, the Packers were playing their backups and weren't really trying when the Bears beat them in the final game of the season. But they lost to the Eagles twice, the Vikings twice, and the Lions twice. So you say, okay, the Packers were a very good playoff team, but they were not an elite team. And whenever they went up against one of these elite teams, they struggled and they lost. So I'm thinking that could be where the Lions are this year, where it's like they are a good team, but once they come up against an elite team like the Packers, now they struggle and can't win. So that's what I think it is. Or it could just be Jared Goff struggling with a new offensive coordinator. That is something that I just don't understand because without Sean McVay or Ben Johnson, Jared Goff is 3-19-1. 3 wins, 19 losses, and 1 tie. And that's kind of crazy to me because he's the same quarterback. So maybe John Morton isn't like tailoring the offense towards him and they're just not meshing well together and Jared Goff needs his specific guy to play for him to play well. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's like if Goff needs that, but again, I think the Lions are going to be fine. Hutchinson does need to play a bit better, but that's also a struggle where they kind of have Hutchinson, that's it. I get Marcus Davenport had that one good year, but hasn't been good since. Lynn McNeil does offer some pass rush, but he is still recovering from his torn ACL and is not going to be back mid-season. It feels like they're missing that other guy to pair with Hutchinson, and it's just not there yet. But again, I just don't. The Lions got beat bad, and so I think there's a lot of optimism for the Packers, especially with Micah Parsons. Because think about this: Micah Parsons joined the defense on Monday, and so he's only been with the team for less than a week. Then think about his game shape. He missed all of training camp with the Cowboys because he was holding out for a new contract, so he's not in his peak game shape yet. And he's also dealing with a back injury. So now imagine what he is going to do against some bad offensive tackles. Because Penei Sewell is either the best or second best tackle in the league. And so if he can dominate Penei Sewell, imagine what he can do with these less than offensive tackles. And so I think Micah Parsons, there's a lot of hype for him. And I think he's going to do really, really amazing this season. Because again, it felt like a lot of factors were going against him. And he played really, really insanely well. And so overall, a lot of optimism for the Packers, and I don't think there should be that much panic with the Lions yet. Like if they lose to the Bears, and if they're maybe like 1-4 or 0-3, then panic needs to start setting in. But I don't think the Lions need to be too worried. I think the Packers are just an elite team, and sometimes when you go against these elite teams, you lose, and it's hard. The next game is the Houston Texans versus the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams won 14-9. So the Los Angeles Rams beat the Houston Texans 14-9. The Rams' leading passer was Matthew Stafford, who threw for 245 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Kyren Williams, who had 66 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Puka Nacua, who had 130 yards. For the Texans, their leading passer was C.J. Stroud, who had 188 yards and an interception. Their leading rusher was Nick Chubb, who had 60 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Jaden Higgins, who had 32 receiving yards. So both these games, the defenses played really well. The Texans were a very bend but don't break, where the Rams were able to get a lot of yards, but as soon as they got in the red zone, the Texans stopped them, and the Texans played really well. The Texans' offense is a liability, though. And so, I'll stick with the Rams. So even though the Rams, their offense didn't score a lot of points, they did play really well. And Puka Nacua played great. Devontae Adams played great. Matthew Stafford, he played great even though he's battling through injuries. And so I think the connection between the three of them is going to be absolutely spectacular this season. And I really think the Rams are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL. Their defense last year was really, really good and has only been better. And then the Texans. Their defense is really great and they deserve a lot of credit for that. But just like last year, they relied on their defense to win them games. And this year, I don't know if they can do that again, where the defense is still great and going to win them games, but CJ Stroud just needs to play better. He had a great rookie year. Last year he was terrible, and then this year he just needs to step up at some point. Like, at what point does he go back to playing great? Because, again, his rookie year, it's one of those things where amazing for a rookie, where if in a standard season, you'd be like, okay, that was probably average to above average, but for a rookie, that was amazing, and CJ Stroud just needs to play well. The offense struggled a lot, CJ Stroud struggled a lot, and CJ Stroud needs to earn his number 2 overall picks, or was it number 3 overall? I think it was actually number 3 overall because I think Will Anderson went at number 2. But CJ Stroud needs to. No, he went at number 2. Whatever. CJ Stroud just needs to win his number 2 overall pick quarterback status, and he hasn't earned that yet. And so overall, I think there's a lot of concern for the Texans with this offense because if the offense is inept and can't really play well, that's going to hurt you in tons and tons of games. Because like what I talked about previously with the Colts and the Giants, where you can only do so much of a great defense. At some point, your offense needs to step in and play well. And then the Rams, I think this is kind of low light where it's only going to go up from here. Matthew Stafford just needs to stay healthy, and I think this can be a really great Rams team. The next game is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Buffalo Bills. The Bills won the game 41-40. So the Bills won the game 41-40. The Bills' leading passer was Josh Allen, who had 394 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was James Cook, who had 44 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is Keon Coleman, who had 112 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Ravens, their leading passer was Lamar Jackson, who had 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Derrick Henry, who had 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. And their leading receiver was Zay Flowers, who had 143 yards and a touchdown. So this was a battle of 2 elite offenses. And really, it felt like not even really that Lamar Jackson was the factor. It felt like Derrick Henry versus Josh Allen, because Derrick Henry was just killing the Bills' defense all game long, constantly rushing, constantly doing amazing, until Derrick Henry had a key fumble, and that felt like it turned the momentum around. With 4 minutes left, the Ravens were up by 15, and it felt like the Bills had no chance coming for the win. And at one point, the Ravens even had a 99% chance of winning. But then Josh Allen put his Superman cape on and just played out of his mind and won the game. And it's interesting because this kind of concerns me more for the Ravens than it does the Bills, where both defenses played horrible. But the Bills, their defense is horrible. Like, you expect the Bills' defense to play horrible. Whereas the Ravens, their defense is supposed to be really good. Jaire Alexander struggled a lot. Yes, he's been battling through some injuries, and so maybe he is washed and just not the player he used to be, but he played horrible. And then just overall, the Ravens' defense as a whole played bad. And then I just can't explain it where Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry were dominating the whole game. And then right at the end, they're like, no, we're just not going to do it anymore. Like, they're kind of like the reverse Bengals, where it's like, it makes no sense why the Bengals play so bad when they're a good team. The Ravens, why are they they play so good, and then why do they turn into a bad team at the end? Like, it makes no sense. I know John Harbaugh deserves a lot of the blame, where they're constantly blowing end of game leads. Like, I don't know who deserves the blame, where it's like Lamar Jackson or Harbaugh or a mixture of both, but they just can't win late games with huge leads. It makes no sense. You're dominating the entire game, and then right at the end, you're like, no, I don't want to dominate anymore. I don't want to play anymore. I can't explain it. It literally makes no sense. And then, so there was one incident I do want to address. So what happened is that there was a fan, and DeAndre Hopkins scored a touchdown, and a fan kind of came up while they were celebrating with kind of other fans and hit DeAndre Hopkins in the head, and I believe he hit Lamar Jackson in the head too. And so Lamar Jackson pushed the fan. This fan should be, I believe he has been banned, but it was an unreputable source I read that from, so I'm not entirely sure if it's true or not, but this fan should be banned from every NFL stadium, period. He needs to be banned. He should not be allowed at any NFL game ever again. You cannot hit players like that. And also, on the flip side, Lamar Jackson shouldn't have pushed him. Security should have done their job. Lamar shouldn't have pushed him. And that's kind of like the barrier where it's like, yes, the fan broke the rules by touching Lamar Jackson, and now he's banned. And Lamar Jackson kind of broke the rules by touching the fan. And if I was the NFL, I'd probably suspend Lamar Jackson for a game because, again, you can't lay your hands on your paying customers, even if they do something wrong. Security should take care of it, and he should be banned, period. And I kind of think Lamar Jackson shouldn't have done that. And just kind of like the Jalen Carter spitting incident, there's no place for pushing even rowdy and unruly fans. So I think Lamar Jackson should be suspended for a game for that. I don't think it'll happen because a lot of this stuff, you'd come to be surprised, where a lot of it comes from media pressure and public pressure, and no one's putting on the NFL pressure on the NFL to suspend Lamar Jackson for pushing the fan because the fan was such a jerk. But I just think you just can't have that in the sport of football. But overall, really good game, and it gets me excited because again, the Bills, great offense, defense is going to let them down. Defense is going to cost you a lot of games. It's going to cost you maybe even appearance in the Super Bowl. That needs to be fixed and quickly. I don't know how to fix it, but it somehow needs to be fixed. And then the Ravens, I just think it's one of those things where it's kind of like even when the Ravens are better than the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes always beats Lamar Jackson. It feels like that, where it's like even when the Ravens have a better team than the Bills, uh, Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen always beats Lamar Jackson. He just has his number. It makes no sense, but overall, it was a really good game and probably game of the year. The final game of the week was the Minnesota Vikings versus the Chicago Bears. The Vikings won 27 to 24. So the Vikings won 27 to 24. The Vikings' leading passer was J.J. McCarthy, who threw for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Jordan Mason, who had 68 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Justin Jefferson, who had 44 receiving yards and a touchdown. And Aaron Jones, who had 44 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Bears, their leading passer was Caleb Williams, who had 210 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Caleb Williams, who had 58 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was DJ Moore, who had 68 receiving yards. So this is really the tale of two halves. So if you look at the first quarter, Caleb Williams looked spectacular. He was really amazing in Ben Johnson's offense. They went down, scored a touchdown immediately. Second drive, they went down. Even though they got a field goal, they looked really, really spectacular. And then J.J. McCarthy, he looked absolutely horrible. Because I said in my predictions, I said, I think the Vikings will be good unless J.J. McCarthy is an absolute bust, looks abysmal, can't play football. And in the first half of the game, that's what J.J. McCarthy was. J.J. McCarthy looked like a bust. He looked abysmal. He looked like he couldn't play football. He looked absolutely horrible. Then, all of a sudden, halftime hits, and everything completely changes. Caleb Williams looks inept. Caleb Williams can't play. Caleb Williams played horrible in the second half of the game. And then, all of a sudden, a light bulb clicked in J.J. McCarthy's head, and he looked really, really great. And he led the Vikings to this great comeback victory. And so, it's kind of interesting, because if you look at the first half, you're like, wow, Bears look good. Caleb Williams looks good. The Bears are going to be good. And then if you look at the second half, it's like, wow, Vikings look good. J.J. McCarthy looks good. This team's going to be good. So it's really interesting because who's going to be able to put the complete game together? Because I think there's both optimism and pessimism for both teams. So with Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson, it is a win in the sense where at least the proof of concept is there. That is a good thing there, where you can look and say, okay, Caleb Williams, he has the tools to play well, because he did play really well in the first half. He was making spectacular passes, he looked comfortable, he looked confident in Ben Johnson's system, they were scheming a lot of players open, even when Caleb Williams had to go to his second or third read, he was hitting the guy instantly. Caleb Williams looked really good in the first half, so you say, okay, at least there's proof of concept. There's proof that Caleb Williams can play. There's proof that Ben Johnson's offense works. There's proof of concept there. Now you just got to extend it to the whole game. And I don't know if that's possible or not, but at least there's an idea there that it is potentially possible, where Caleb Williams just needs to play better throughout the whole game, and Ben Johnson needs to call better plays. But ultimately, I'd say it was on Caleb Williams, where he just needs to play better, plain and simple. And then kind of same thing, but reverse for J.J. McCarthy. He was absolutely horrible. He was abysmal in the first half, throwing a pick six. He couldn't hit an open receiver. He was struggling in the pocket. He just couldn't do anything. And then a light bulb flipped in the second half, and then he was really good. And so, again, same thing there, where it's like proof of concept, where J.J. McCarthy can play well because he played really well in the second half. But you got to extend that out the whole game. You can't have first half J.J. McCarthy really ever again. That's how abysmal and how bad he was. So overall, again, there's a lot of positives and negatives in this game for both teams. So even though the Vikings got the win, it's just that I think it kind of evens itself out where it's like, okay, the Bears' positives came in the first half and negatives came in the second half, and the Vikings' positives came in the second half and their negatives came in the first half. So overall, both teams have a lot to be good, happy about and a lot to be worried about. With the Vikings, at least they got a win. So even if even if McCarthy doesn't take him to the playoffs and doesn't play well, at least they got a win under the belt. That's good. and then the Bears just need to play better. So that is what happened in week 1 of the NFL season. If you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. I will be live tweeting every single game on my Twitter/X account at Croccast. And like I said, just please hit that subscribe button. It'd mean a lot to me. Let me know your thoughts and comments below. What teams play well, what teams do not think play well, what players you like, what players you don't like. And I'll see you on the next one.